Hello everybody and welcome to the webinar about satellites for regenerative agriculture that is organized by DynaCrop, a service by World from Space. My name is Jan Labohy and I will be the one who will be presenting and also answering your questions. Feel free at any time to use the Q&A function of Zoom for asking the questions, and if there are some technical issues, you can also use the chat. Today we are having a summary of our webinar series, putting together the most important stuff about the regenerative agriculture from the multiple sources and multiple views of different end users. Why we are actually talking about the regenerative agriculture? It's become a big trend recently, with a lot of multinationals promising to turn their supply chain into the regenerative agriculture practices. For example, Nestlé has promised that around 20% of their key ingredients will be sourced through regenerative agriculture methods in 3 years. And by 2030, it should be half of the key ingredients. So almost 14 million tons of the agriculture production. Also, PepsiCo has announced their goals for 2030. They want to support regenerative farming practices across 7 million acres, which should be equivalent to their entire agriculture footprint. So regenerative agriculture is not an idea how the agriculture should change. It's actually a reality that is already being implemented at the moment. And that's why we're organizing this webinar to give you insights into the process and how the satellites and Earth observation in general can support this trend. Today, I would like to introduce you briefly to our company, how we work with satellite data and agriculture, and then we will look directly at the services that we would like to develop in the future in order to support the regenerative farming for the multiple stakeholders. All this webinar series is meant as an invitation for the co-design process, which means if you are one of the actors in the food production value chain and you would like to build on regenerative farming practices and support it, we invite you to get in touch with us because we believe that creating the services together with the stakeholders and with the end users is the only way how to create a sustainable product. So let's start first with World from Space. We are a Czech-based company, 5 years old, with around 12 people. And the key topic that we're focusing on is really unlocking satellite data for agriculture and food value chain. We can see that the scientific evidence is there. We know how to use satellite data for agriculture purposes. The only way what's struggling today is to get in touch with the end user and to tell the end user how to actually use the data and how to use the services. So this is what we do. And apart from the commercial activities, we have also R&D projects with the European Space Agency. We provide consulting to EU SPA. We run several research projects with agriculture universities and big farms in the Czech Republic. And we're part of the large Horizon 2020 project called eShape, where we are together with the other actors working on the co-design of the future services for the European Earth observation companies. So thank you for the eShape project that helped us to fund our activities in the regenerative agriculture domain. But if we look at the agriculture as such, now for the beginning, we can see that there are 4 biggest problems that need to be challenged in the future, and that regenerative farming is really giving answers to. The first one is the overall business model of agriculture, because today, mostly in Europe, the farming revenues are based really on the subsidies that are based on the size of the farm, rather than on the waste of the production or the practices that the farm is doing. And this leads to several negative impacts, like overexploitation of the soil, focus on the economic outcomes and not on the on the landscape activities or sustainable activities or soil-related activities. So this whole business model of agriculture now is not really working, not supporting the way forward. The second problem is in the supply chain, because the big food production companies, they found out that the supply chains are basically not sustainable. It's not possible to do it in the future in a way it was done in the past. A lot of the suppliers are using too many fossil fuels. So they are too carbon intensive. They do practices that are not sustainable at all. And also the supply chain today is too complex. It was shown very much during the COVID pandemic, but also now it's fostered by the war in Ukraine. We can see the supply chain is too long and the food production needs to be more local based, and there should be less links before the customer gets the product. So the key thing now is to really shorten the supply chain and turn them green. The third problem, which is connected to this, is the soil degradation. The soil is the key element that enables agriculture. There is no agriculture without soil, at least on a large scale. But as I already told you, with the business model, the farming today is focusing on the output, on the yields. It's not focusing on the soil health. And this is being done for already 50, 60 years, and we can see the result. The soil is depleted, the yields are reducing every year, and the only way how the agriculture today is answering is by increasing the inputs. So more fertilizers, more pesticides, more other applications that are there in order to substitute the basic functions that are provided by a healthy soil. So this needs to be tackled, and the practices in agriculture needs to change in order to support the basic characteristics of the soil and its productivity. And the last one, the obvious one, is the climate change. As the weather patterns are changing, it's really necessary to react more on what is actually happening on a field. The practices that were based on the ordinary steps that are usually happening in the same time during the season, this is not possible anymore, because the season can start weeks ahead or weeks later than usual. Then it's much faster or much slower, and really the applications and all other practices needs to be fine-tuned based on the real situation at the field. And this can also very much different on a field level if you are in the different places in Europe. So those are the key problems of agriculture that the regenerative farming is tackling, and also we in DynaCrop are working on them. Our approach to this is cooperation. We believe that if we are to change the whole agriculture, it must be a joint activity of all the stakeholders, of all the actors that are involved in agriculture activities, and each of them needs to put something together, and each of them needs to be incentivized for this. Our part is the satellite data analysis. We believe that satellite data is providing one of the very big added values that can be used by the users across the food production value chain, but it needs to be also combined with other sources of data from drones or IoT, the production data, social economic data. So we're basically working with the integrators that put all of these things together, and we help them to use satellite data efficiently, fast, without the necessity of a big development or big studying, because we understand the technology, but our client doesn't need to understand the technology. It's focused most on the benefits that it brings. So our product called DynaCrop is helping companies to do the crop monitoring, current state of the fields, the past state of the fields in the past. We provide field statistics for better understanding of the productivity zones in the fields and their development. We create application maps that are used for variable rate fertilizing, variable rate seeding. Also, we're working with the plant growth regulators. We create the maps that are then ready to be used by machinery and to be applied on a field. And we also monitor soil moisture, understanding the current trends and the variability in soil moisture on a field level. All of this is a cloud-based product, which is completely automated and is ready to be integrated in any kind of software solution which is used in agriculture. It can be farm management software, it can be food traceability system, it can be mobile application for farmers. Those kind of systems are using our API to get the information and then provide it to their clients. So it's very easy to implement. It's quite fast. In a couple of weeks, it's ready, and it can be directly used by the end user, which we provide the trainings and education about how to use it as well. So this is what we do today, but we would like to turn this product more to the regenerative agriculture domain. And let's discuss now what the regenerative agriculture is. The EIT Food, the European Institute of Technology, which is focused on food production, has named regenerative agriculture trend number 2 in 2022, so this year, because as I was showing in the beginning, the question now is not if regenerative agriculture is being implemented, but it's how to implement regenerative agriculture. It's already being implemented across large-scale farms in many countries, and it's really growing. So these are just examples of other companies that already have their own internal targets on implementing regenerative practices, like Unilever, Walmart, Danone, or General Mills. And they're not in the idea stage. They already produced implementation guidelines like this one by Unilever, which directly says what the farmer needs to do to get certified for the regenerative practices, and how they can be incentivized if they follow these principles. And this overall is also supported by the EU programs, especially the farm-to-farm strategy that is really focusing on understanding the whole agriculture and food production supply chain and turning it sustainable. So there's also the institutional support for this. But we can get directly to what it actually means. So regenerative agriculture, as I was mentioning, is focusing on the soil health. That's the key thing that needs to be focused today, because the soil is being overused. There's too much production on it. The soil gives much more than it gets from the agriculture activities. And this results in the loss of fertility, the loss of biodiversity, loss of the organic matter in the soil. Regenerative practices, as they're called, regenerative, they focus on the regeneration of the soil. And the basic idea is that the agriculture activity shouldn't lead to exploitation and depletion of soil. Agriculture activity should lead into rebuilding the biodiversity and increasing organic matter. So more agriculture activity you do, the more, the better soil should be. That's the key thing. That's the mindset that the agriculture is bringing, and it has several benefits across the food production value chain. For the farmer, the key benefit is that he has more fertile soil. But for the society, there's another benefit, and it's connected to the carbon cycle. Because more organic matter in the soil means that there is a CO2 that was taken from the air and was put into the soil. So it's a natural way how to reduce the carbon emissions in the air. And this also means that the agriculture, which today is producing CO2 emission, under regenerative practices can reduce, be a net not net emitter, but a net sink of the CO2 emissions. If there is a CO2 captured, it means that there can be also some carbon credits created. And in this way, there is a new source of funding for both producers and customers. Because if you have a regenerative production, you create a new products that are labeled as regenerative, you can get the budget for actually giving reward to both producer that he follows the regenerative practices and the consumer that he supports the overall change by buying the product. And this incentive can come from the carbon market. That's why regenerative farming is also sometimes called carbon farming, because there is this new source of revenue that actually changes the whole way of agriculture. So that's why the regenerative agriculture has actually the biggest potential of being the game changer in agriculture, because recently with the sustainable agriculture, organic agriculture, there's not basically enough money to give the incentive to the whole chain to change. But with the money coming from the carbon trading and carbon credits that can be distributed across the food production value chain, this really brings the biggest opportunity for the change. Here we have some of the practices that the regenerative farming is focusing on that should be implemented on a farm scale. So to support the soil fertility, also the soil organic carbon content, it's very important to change the crops that are being grown on the soil and keep the soil always covered with some kind of plants. So that's the first one, to change the things that are growing and keep it covered. The second one is reduce tillage, which means regenerative practices are focusing on lowering the disruption of the soil, or even doing no tillage, which gives the soil organic matter time and place to grow and to provide the natural processes that are there, because in a natural way there is no tillage on a normal places with the soil. The other one is to use also the livestock and waste from organic production, so compost and manure, as a way how to put nutrients back into the soil, because the soil is giving nutrients through the plants, and it's clear that something needs to come back in order to provide to keep the fertility or increase the fertility of the soil. And if you don't want to use mineral fertilizers, because it's the industrial way, the potential of organic fertilizer is high. The problem, of course, is the cost and availability. But when it's there, it's creating really a big positive impact on the soil quality. The last part of the practices is focused on multi-crop and agroforestry, which is providing a high resilience of the fields by making them more diverse. So if you have more different crops on the same field at the same time, it's more resilient to the pest, because it cannot go from across the whole field in the same speed if there are more different crops. And also agroforestry, when you combine trees and agriculture production, it gives benefits for both parts of this industry. So those are some of the practices that can be implemented on a farm scale. And this is the illustration how the overall process works if the regenerative agriculture is implemented on a large scale and automated way. So with the farmer in the left side is planting and working on the regenerative farming practices. This is observed by a satellite and automatically analyzed with the services like DynaCrop. And the information is then transferred into some kind of system. It can be food traceability system, it can be some blockchain application, it can be just a simple database that collects the information about the farmers. And if all the requirements, like I've showed you before, the Unilever requirements. If all of them are followed, there is automatically or manually a certificate created, and the reward can come to the farmer or the consumer that is buying the products. And this can be done in monetary ways, like in euros, but it can be done also through some tokens using the blockchain technology. So we have the whole cycle covered, and we have the benefits for the end user, we have the benefits for the end consumer, and the benefit for the food production company is in better understanding of the food supply chain and better support for the sustainable in it. So the company is sure that in the long term, their supply chain is resilient and sustainable, and it can generate the profits both to the company and to the society. So if we look at the whole food production value chain, you can imagine it like this. This is the example with the blockchain system, but it can be also just a normal IT system. So if you have a farmer that he registers the activities that he does for the regenerative farming, this is then controlled by a satellite. And this information is then shared with the producers or distributors and retailers and also customers. So it's the information which is available for everyone, and everybody is able to control if this is being done, because we have the experience from the past projects also at the beginning of the organic farming support system, that some of the farmers were using the benefits but not really following the practices. But in this farm to fork way of thinking, where the information is really distributed across the value chain and is available across the value chain, this supports the regenerative practices and at all the stages. As I was saying, the key game changer for regenerative farming is the carbon trading. Today, we have quite challenging climate goals. At least in the EU is planning to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. We have also the Fit for 55 package in EU that is focusing on reducing the emissions of CO2. And this is a graph from the emission trading, the carbon emission trading in the EU. And today, 1 ton of CO2 is costing around 80 euros. This means that if a power plant or a large scale company wants to produce 1 ton of CO2, it has to pay 80 euros for the carbon credit. You can imagine that if the farmer is able to sink 1 ton of CO2 into his land, there can be this 80 euros that will be generated because somebody else needs to put carbon into the atmosphere. If you're producing cars, you can limit the emissions, but you cannot get to zero emissions. So you always need to buy the carbon credits. And in this way, the regenerative farming is gaining the potential source of incomes for the large-scale implementation, because in the long term, we can see from the analysis that the price of carbon will be somewhere between 50 and 200 euros per ton. And the potential of regenerative farming is in millions of tons of CO2 per year. So there are millions of euros theoretically available for the change. How it's being done today is through the voluntary carbon market. The picture I was showing you before is from the emission trading scheme established by the European Union. It's a big scheme that is compulsory for the industry, but for example, cities are not part of it. Agriculture production is not part of it. Also, building sector is still not part of it. But these actors that are not part of the emission trading can also buy the carbon credits, but on a voluntary market, which means there is no regulation on it. There is no regulatory push that the actors needs to buy it. But if they have their own climate policies, and most of the companies, they have today their climate policies, also the cities are implementing the large-scale climate policies, they can buy some of the credits on the voluntary market in order to compensate the emissions they do. So there is already a big market going on this voluntary carbon market, and the actual situation is that there is a higher demand for the credits that are based on regenerative farming than there is a supply, because historically the voluntary carbon market is based on reforestation activities, these activities when there are trees planted, but then there are the carbon credits directly sold before the tree has actually grown. So those are more virtual credits. There are also credits based on renewable energy projects, but in all of these projects, you have only one benefit. Like the renewable energy, the benefit is that there will be carbon-free electricity production. But with the regenerative farming, you have also the benefit that the soil is getting better. You have a benefit of more quality food, and you have the benefit of really changing the whole agriculture system at the same time while buying this voluntary carbon credit. So this is the way how it can be organized. And I would like to now show you what's the role of Earth observation and satellite data in this process. To really help the regenerative agriculture to be implemented at scale, there needs to be two things coming from the industry, Earth observation industry, to do. The first one is to support the actors across the value chain, and the second one is to control the actors across the value chain, because we really need to help people to do the things, but control as well if they are doing it. So there are basically 6 ways how to do this, and I will now show you some of the examples about how we approach these ideas. So the first one is large-scale monitoring. The thing in regenerative agriculture is if it needs to be implemented on scale, it really needs to be monitored on scale, and the way how to do it is through the satellite data integration, where you can monitor the current state of the crops, and you can provide the advice which is tailored to the current stage of the crop growth, the current crop phenology, and the timing of the application, which really fits the needs on the ground. This information, again, can be then shared across the value chain. So the food producers can know at which stages all of their suppliers are, if there are some problems arising on their suppliers' fields, or if the situation is going to be better than expected. And this can help also the more precise planning, the just-in-time practices in the other part of the food production after the farming. The other part is the support for the variable application of the organic fertilizers. It's using the basic idea of precision farming, which's been here for more than 20 years. And the idea is that the fields as such are not equal in all the places. There are better places in the field and there are worse places in the field, and each of them requires a different treatment. So it doesn't make sense to spread the fertilizers across the field in the same volume. It's better to look at the different zones, how they are, and give each part of the field the treatment that is necessary. Here we have the example for the fertilizing with the organic fertilizers before the potato production on a field. It's using long-term analysis of the zones in the field, combined with analysis of a previous year. So where was the uptake of the nutrients by the plants during the last season? And we provide one map which is then used for the variable rate application. There is more nutrients applied in the darker greener zones and less in the orange zones. Another part of the process that we can support with our satellite-based products is a soil sampling optimization. As we discussed, the key thing for the regenerative farming is to generate the carbon credits that can then support the overall transition. To be able to create a carbon credit, you need to have a verifiable measurements. Some companies today are trying to provide these systems directly from the satellite data, but this is a quite unmature application, and it will take years before this will be certified. So the best process today is through soil sampling, which means that the people go to the field, they take samples, and in a lab they measure the soil organic content, also the content of other important particles in the soil. This process is time demanding and also costly, but with the help of satellite data and our service, we provide the maps of the soil sampling points. So if when the company is trying to find the best places where to do the soil sampling, to have less samples that are more relevant to what's the overall performance of the field, we provide the points where the soil samples should be taken, and this then represents the good field, the overall soil quality, because it's based on some indices derived from satellite data that are connected to the soil organic carbon content in the soil. So this is another way how to support the process that then leads into the certification of the credits and their sale on the voluntary carbon market. Another process that we support is this controlling. One of the practices that is required under the regenerative farming is cover crops. When I say required, it means that there is a common understanding that this is a good practice. With the regenerative farming, there is still no official certification like with from the organic farming. So there is no set of practices that would be binded by the law. But as you saw previously, some companies already provide the certification, the internal one, and the cover crops are usually one part of this. So with our system, we are able to automatically detect if there are cover crops implemented on a field or not. And then this information is shared across the value chain to all of the actors. Another part that we support is the controls of the tillage. The lower reduced tillage or no tillage is the preferred practice in organic in regenerative farming. So our system again detects the tillage and the way how the tillage was done. And again, then this information is used for verifying the information that was provided by the farmer. So overall, this our system helps basically three things. The first one is to support the farmers, all the pilot projects that the farmers are implementing in some of the fields before turning their whole production to regenerative practices. We support them with the data regarding their field, the soil moisture, or the yield potential zones in their field. We also provide monitoring of the specific practices for the other parts of the value chain to clarify if the regenerative practices are taking place or not. And with the implementation with other systems, this is possible to directly trigger the payments that can compensate the farmer for their turning to regenerative practices. The overall idea of the system is to really monitor the investment, because the large multinational companies are now spending a lot of money to support the regenerative practices, and they really need to find out if it pays off, if the farmers are following the practices, and if there is the soil organic carbon increase in the soil if the soil is generally healthier after the production than it was before. So the system, the DynaCrop, is able to help to monitor this investment in all parts of the food production value chain. So this is it. This is how we think about it. And we invite you to take part in our co-design activities. It doesn't matter if you are a company that owns a farm, runs a blockchain system, or is a satellite data analysis company like ours. We believe that there is always place for cooperation and for co-designing of the products that can help the implementation of regenerative farming on scale. So that's the end of the introduction, and I would like to invite you to the Q&As. If you have any question, feel free to type it down, and I'll be happy to answer it. Before this is done, here's my contact. We'll be very happy to get in touch with you personally. You can find the connection at dynacrop.space. You can also send me an email or a WhatsApp message, depending on which channel you prefer. And I'll be very happy to talk to you about your ideas and the ways how to work with the industry. And I can see that there is a question in the chat. If the presentation will be shared, yes, the presentation will be available at our website, dynacrop.space. Also, the recording of this webinar will be there, so you can go through it later on. There is another question. How do you map the crop types and the crop field boundaries? Which in-situ data do you use? So how do we map the crop types? We are usually working together with the systems that already have the crop types that are there provided by the farmer. This can be checked with the crop detection, which is available based on satellite data. It's not implemented in the system yet, but it can be implemented in the future. There are also open source projects like Sen4Cap and Sen4Agri that provide some kind of solution that can be implemented fastly. Also, there will be a crop type mask available as part of the Copernicus land monitoring service since 2023 on. So this will be also information that will be used by the system. For the crop boundaries, we're working mostly with the crop boundaries that are again inserted into the system from LPIS, the Land Parcel Information System, which is used in most of the EU countries, which provides the polygons of the field boundaries. Also, some systems enable farmers to click the field boundaries or use the machinery that has the positioning using the GPS and GNSS systems. So this is another part. And for those who want to get the field boundaries, even without those systems, there are companies like DigiFarm that are providing the field boundaries as a service. So you can approach them and you can use their service. And which in-situ data do you use? This is a question always about the partner that we are working with. We're working with the data that is there. Usually it's about the crop type, it's about the timing of the different practices, it's about the results of the soil sampling. We're also working with the data from harvesters. It's quite challenging job to work with the data from the harvesters because it's not that easy to calibrate the sensors and to compare the results from different machinery or even different machines of the same brand. But this is something that we work with. We also work with the in-situ data about soil moisture from the weather stations and from the soil moisture monitoring networks. And some companies are also combining our services with the drone data. So this is also possible to use both inputs into the analysis. Right. So check if there are some other questions. There are no other questions at this moment. So I'd like to thank you for taking part in the webinar. And I wish you good luck. And please get in touch with us so we can talk about how we can cooperate to be part of this regenerative farming revolution, because it will change the agriculture in upcoming years, and everybody is invited to take part in this change. So thank you very much, and have a nice day.